For decades, the former name of the Washington football team was a source of anger and frustration for many Native Americans. Vernon Belcourt, a leader of the American Indian movement, put it this way: "We welcome all you good Washington football fans, but we don't welcome the chicken feathers, the paint, the cheap Hollywood chants. Leave our culture, leave our spiritual traditions alone." But what was the big deal? Didn't the team name honor Native Americans? Or is that just a myth? Hi, I'm Che Jim, and welcome to Crash Course Native American History. For a long time, this is how Native Americans were commonly represented. If they weren't out hunting buffalo, they were gathered around a table with some pilgrims eating turkey, mashed potatoes, and cranberry sauce. As somebody who's worked a lot of retail in my life, my Thanksgiving meal is usually what's ever left in the break room fridge. This version of nativeness is about as nuanced as a brick wall. And it comes from a variety of myths and misconceptions that have spread like wildfire from the colonial era to the modern day, with real, concrete consequences. Take the first Thanksgiving, for instance. Countless school plays and classroom crafts has presented it as truth, but the real story of that meal is a lot more sinister. But before we get into that, let me take care of something real quick. Katie, Smashbox, please. Myths like the first Thanksgiving are so widespread, fighting them takes serious work. And that can take lots of different forms, including my personal favorite, myth blasting baseball. Now then, where were we? Oh yeah, the first Thanksgiving. So what actually happened that day? In 1620, the Pilgrims landed in an untamed wilderness. Except, wait, this place wasn't untamed at all. It already had a name, Patuxet, which was also the name of the band of the Wampanoag Confederation, who had been farming and living there for generations. But it was a terrible time for the Wampanoag. An epidemic from a disease brought over by other Europeans had wiped out up to 90% of their population, leaving them weak and vulnerable. Meanwhile, the English considered all of this God's will and a great time to take some land. When the Pilgrims arrived in winter, they robbed the homes and graves of Wampanoag who died, promising to repay what they'd taken. They didn't. All the while, the Wampanoag leader, Quinn, was weighing out his options as tensions with other tribes were brewing. He strategically decided the Pilgrims might be good allies if a war broke out. The Wampanoags helped the Pilgrims make it through the winter, and the Pilgrims did throw a harvest feast, but they didn't invite their neighbors. The Wampanoags heard guns going off and sent 90 men over to help. Only then were the Pilgrims like, "Oh, you want some food?" And there wasn't enough to eat. So the Wampanoags went out to hunt some deer. And if there was friendship that day, it didn't last. Within a generation, the tension between Native Americans and English settlers erupted into King Philip's War, one of the deadliest conflicts in US history. So while the Thanksgiving myth might seem like no big deal, it hides a grim reality that this strategic, temporary alliance kicked off a centuries-long disaster for the Wampanoags, who, by the way, are still here, living in New England. But where did this myth come from, and why? Historians point to a few different moments, like the mid-1700s when New Englanders sought to establish themselves as the fathers of America, or the mid-1800s when the US was pushing further west into Indian territory and Abraham Lincoln was trying to unify the country, and the Reconstruction period when whites tried to distance the nation's history from enslavement. Essentially, the story was passed on for political reasons, not historically accurate ones. According to historian David Silverman, the false narrative of Thanksgiving creates an emotional burden for Native Americans and promotes a lighthearted view of historical trauma. It contributes to the spread of false ideas like natives and colonizers got along and Native Americans are a part of the past. The myth that Native Americans no longer exist, often called the myth of the vanishing Indian, couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, I'm here, aren't I? In fact, I'm one of about 6 million natives living in the US today. Part of the reason why we seem invisible is because the media has done a pretty poor job of showing who we really are. For instance, I remember as a kid feeling like there was just no room for people like me in movies. Many of the most popular films were Westerns, which for a long time were the only ways Native Americans were represented to the wider world. These movies made natives seem synonymous with the Wild West, not the here and now, something we also covered in Crash Course Art History. And this omission of Native people from the present can have some serious consequences. One survey of more than 6,000 Native folks found that 87% of those surveyed believed the average American didn't care about Native peoples. That invisibility can cause mental health issues and minimize the effects of anti-Native racism, not to mention the stereotypes that still hang around today in Thanksgiving plays, Halloween costumes, and sports. Like, have you ever seen the Kansas City Chiefs or the Atlanta Brave fans doing this? Yeah, that's called the tomahawk chop. And it's meant to remind us of the savage Indian warriors wielding their tomahawks at cowboys, just like in those Western films. The tomahawk chop is part of this culture we have in the US of using Native people as mascots for sports teams. The myth goes like this. Using a Native American as a mascot honors them and the nation's history and traditions. But, just like the Thanksgiving myth, that's far from the truth. You know what we need to do. Ooh. Like I said earlier, Native Americans aren't just figures from the past, but mascots like these make us seem like we are. In fact, many of the team names that honor Native Americans came about during a time when the US government was trying to assimilate natives out of existence. Through forcing them onto reservations and into boarding schools, white America was like, boom, colonization done. Here's a mascot to remember the good times. Native mascots don't bring the average non-Native person any closer to actually understanding Native people. And disrespect aside, there are real negative effects to that. Studies have shown that exposure to Native stereotypes decreases young Native people's sense of their own worth and the worth of their communities, and can increase depression. And sometimes, sports teams use really offensive language that further harms Native people, like the Washington football team's old name. Native leaders protested the name for decades, but little changed. When controversy bubbled up in 2014, a Washington football alumni site made this statement. "We believe the name deserves to stay. It epitomizes the noble qualities we admire about Native Americans. The same intangibles we expect from Washington's gridiron heroes on game day. Honor, loyalty, unity, respect, courage, and more." And listen, I get it. I'm a huge football fan. But when it comes to the R word, I can't help but think about how it's been used in the past. Back in the mid-1800s, the Minnesota state government offered $200 per Native killed and used the R word to describe, well, what they wanted to exchange. So there's a lot of controversy about this word. Some natives saw no problem with it, while others were offended by it. My take is this. If you wouldn't say it to an actual Native person, you probably shouldn't be saying it at all. Susan Shone Harjo, a Cheyenne and Hodolgi Muskogee activist who spent decades advocating for the name change, has said, "When I was a girl, you barely could make it through your young life without getting attacked by a bunch of white people. And they would always go to that word." To many natives, there's a fundamental mismatch between the idea of Indian and the actual lived experience of being one. And this applies to the financial lives of Native people too. Like, lots of non-Natives think that we are either rich casino Indians or that we're poor and lazy and get everything handed to us. I'll take ironic contradictions for 400. Let's be real. Not all tribes own casinos. For those that do, under a federal law called the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, tribes can only use casino profits for certain things, like healthcare, public safety, education, and infrastructure projects, and per capita payments to tribal members. And the vast majority of casinos don't actually produce much revenue for tribes. The whole rich casino Indian thing is a stereotype that grew out of 90s TV and popular shows like South Park and The Sopranos, and a growing fear of natives becoming an economic threat. Because the thing is, to be really Indian, you need to rely on government handouts, right? You know the drill. As of 2023, natives have the highest poverty rate of any racial group in the US. But media critic Celeste LaCroix has pointed out that the casino Indian myth, in particular, presents natives as immoral, scheming, and undeserving of power and wealth. If people think that you're part of a get-rich-quick scheme, they're not very likely to help you. So let's rapid-fire myth bust real quick. Checks from the government? Some natives do get them, but it's a payment that they're owed for the use of natural resources on their land. Taxes? Tribes don't pay federal taxes because the U.S. Constitution recognizes them as sovereign nations, but virtually all individual natives pay federal income taxes. College tuition? Most native students pay for college through loans, needs-based grants, and merit-based scholarships, same as everybody else. Only sometimes they can get access to native-specific scholarships and state-based tuition waivers if they meet certain criteria. And those tuition waivers are slowly increasing the number of Native Americans who can go to college and graduate. Besides Indian Health Services, or IHS, a federal agency that delivers healthcare to nearly 2.6 million American Indians, if a Native is receiving government assistance, it's not because they're Native. It's because they qualify for the same support open to any U.S. citizen. IHS itself is a result of treaty agreements and federal trust obligations to Native people, where the government was like, we'll take your land and then we'll take care of you. Sort of. Because turns out IHS is chronically underfunded. On average, IHS users get less than half of the money that users of other types of federal healthcare receive each year. So natives aren't even getting everything that they were promised. So, what do we do with all of this? We know that these myths ignore the violent, traumatic history of colonization and promote stereotypes about Native people, all of which harms them and their communities and limits a broader understanding of Native people by non-Natives. But sometimes things do change. During the racial reckonings of 2020, the threat of major sponsors pulling out ultimately made the Washington football team's owner change his tune, and the team was renamed to the Washington Commanders in 2022. But it was the advocacy by indigenous folks like Susan Schoen Harjo and Chief Billy Red Wing Tyak that brought the issue forward in the first place and continued to fight for decades. There's time and space to start swapping out these myths for real stories of real natives, to ditch the native stereotypes in whatever way you know how. Next time, we'll learn about Native American identity and just how complicated it can be. I will see you then. Thanks for watching this episode of Crash Course Native American History, which was filmed at our studio in Indianapolis, Indiana, and was made with the help of all these nice people. If you want to help keep Crash Course free for everyone forever, you can join our community on Patreon.